Remember that feeling when you were a kid, completely lost in a game? Maybe it was building the most, epic fort out of blankets in the living room, or playing make-believe where you were the brave knight saving the kingdom. There was no pressure, just pure unadulterated fun. And yet, without even realizing it, you were learning so much problem solving, creativity, social skills, how to negotiate with your siblings. It felt absolutely effortless, didn't it? Worlds away from, say, sitting down to memorize multiplication tables. Well, today, we are taking a deep dive into game-based learning. If you're an elementary educator, perhaps someone who's always been curious about new ways to engage students, and now you're taking a fresh look at how playing games can truly maybe revolutionize the classroom, you are in the perfect place. Our mission in this deep dive is to give you a foundational understanding of what makes game-based learning so incredibly powerful, how it's deeply rooted in developmental psychology, its fascinating journey through history, and how modern games skillfully leverage well-established learning theories to unlock incredible potential. Get ready for some, surprising insights and practical connections that are going to be directly relevant to your teaching right now.
That's absolutely right. This deep dive is built from an extensive handbook on game-based learning, and we've meticulously extracted the most crucial insights to help you understand the profound intersection of play, games, and education. We're really here to uncover the why and how games can unlock significant learning potential, especially for our youngest students in elementary school.
Okay, let's unpack this. It feels so easy to recognize play, doesn't it? A child laughing as they chase a ball across the playground, a group of friends completely absorbed in a board game around a kitchen table. We just know it when we see it. And yet, it's surprisingly difficult to actually put a finger on a clear definition. How do we even begin to define something so intuitive, so fundamental to human experience? What makes play play?
It's a fantastic question, and, philosophers and psychologists have grappled with it for centuries. One incredibly influential idea came from Johann Huizinga. He famously argued that play isn't just about basic survival needs or simple actions. It's something much deeper. It's done for its own sake, for pure enjoyment. He believed play transcends the immediate needs of life. It's not just about getting something done or reacting to a physical urge. Instead, he proposed it has its own meaning, its own sense, and crucially, it's intrinsically fun. It's an activity done for the pure pleasure of doing it, not for some external reward or necessity. And when we think about designing games for learning, this concept of meaningful play is, it's foundational. That meaning doesn't just come from the game's rules, but from the dynamic interaction between the players, the game's core mechanics, and the surrounding context.
So it's not just the action itself, but the intent and the feeling behind it that truly defines play. I can picture that so clearly. A child building a towering structure with blocks. They're not building it because they need shelter or because someone told them to do it as a task. They're doing it for the sheer joy of stacking, the delicate challenge of balance, and the inevitable, delightful crash that comes with knocking it down.
That's the pure pleasure Huizinga is talking about, isn't it?
Precisely. That sheer pleasure is absolutely key. Now, within developmental psychology, researchers have attempted to create more concrete ways to define play so we can actually study it. For example, Krasner and Tepler proposed 4 criteria for identifying what they called pure play: flexibility, positive emotion, non-literal thinking, and intrinsic motivation. They suggested that if a behavior exhibits all 4 of these factors, it's pure play. On the other hand, play-like behaviors might only involve some of these. But I can already think of some scenarios that might challenge those criteria. Not all play is perfectly flexible, right? Think about following the very strict rules of a complex board game, or even a game of red light, green light, where the rules are quite rigid. And certainly some forms of play can involve negative emotions, like the intense frustration when you lose a highly competitive game, or the anxiety you feel when trying desperately to win. So it's not always just a giggle fest, is it?
You're absolutely right to point out those nuances. Other researchers, like Smith and Volstead, acknowledged those complexities. They included the 4 criteria you mentioned and added a 5th, dominated by means rather than ends. This means the process of playing is more important than the final outcome. What they found, interestingly, was that everyday observers generally agreed on what behaviors look like play, but they often disagreed on which specific factors, like flexibility or positive emotion, were always involved. Their conclusion, and the approach we really embrace, is that there isn't one single defining feature of play. However, the more of these criteria that are involved in a behavior, the more certain we can be that it truly is play. It's a spectrum, really, not a strict checklist.
Right, a spectrum. That makes more sense.
To connect this directly to an elementary classroom, imagine a group of kindergartners completely immersed in a dramatic play center, perhaps pretending to be a family running a grocery store. they're incredibly flexible. The mom might suddenly decide to become the cashier, or the groceries might magically transform into toys. They show clear positive emotion, laughing and giggling throughout. It's highly non-literal. A simple cardboard box becomes a bustling shopping cart. And crucially, they are deeply intrinsically motivated. They want to play this way. It wasn't assigned as a task they had to complete. This scenario is a perfect illustration of pure play. Now, contrast that with asking a child to play a flashcard game during a drill if they genuinely don't enjoy it. It quickly loses that intrinsic motivation and non-literal aspect, making it far less like true play. The essence of playful learning, the power of it, really lies in that intrinsic joyful engagement.
So we've talked about what play is that elusive, intrinsically motivating activity. But how does this seemingly simple act of play actually drive learning and development in children? This is where two giants of developmental psychology, Jean Piaget and Lev Vygotsky, step in, offering powerful yet distinct perspectives that are absolutely crucial for educators to understand. Developmental psychology has long recognized play as one of the most natural and impactful forms of learning. For instance, children engage in complex pretend play well before they develop a full theory of mind, that understanding that others have different thoughts and feelings than their own. And there's broad consensus. Play is critical for a child's cognitive, physical, social, and emotional development. It's not just a nice to have, it's a must have.
Let's start with Piaget, whose groundbreaking work focused heavily on how children's thinking develops. In his seminal book, Piaget saw play as absolutely integral to a child's cognitive growth, particularly in supporting their symbolic abilities, that amazing capacity to use one thing to represent another. He believed that play evolves right alongside a child's overall cognitive development, becoming more abstract, more symbolic, and more social as they move through different developmental stages.
Okay, Piaget. I remember him from my education courses.
Right. For Piaget, one of the primary ways play contributes to cognitive development is by activating existing schemas. Now, think of schemas as our brain's basic mental blueprints or frameworks for organizing knowledge and behavior. They're like our mental categories for understanding the world. Play, for Piaget, was primarily about assimilation. This means taking new experiences or environmental stimuli and fitting them into these existing schemas. It's like incorporating new information into what you already know, strengthening those mental connections. He argued that the earliest forms of play are simply for functional pleasure. Imagine an infant, for example, playing by activating a sensory motor schema, like sucking, even when there's no actual need for food. They might nurse on a fuzzy blanket just because the sensation itself feels good and helps them practice that skill.
That makes perfect sense for our elementary educators listening. You can see this principle at work when a child in an early elementary classroom is repeatedly practicing a new letter sound or recognizing numbers. They might do it in a non-demanding, playful context, maybe even whispering the sound to themselves just because it feels good to correctly make the sound or identify the number. It's not about being forced to memorize, but about the pure satisfaction of exercising and mastering a new skill. Is that assimilation in action, the repetitive practice solidifying and refining their schemas, making those connections stronger in their brains?
Absolutely. It's a spot-on example of assimilation. And as play develops and children's symbolic capabilities grow, they can do even more sophisticated things. They can extract elements from multiple existing schemas and combine them in play to create entirely new cognitive structures. So while play primarily helps children practice and reinforce existing knowledge, it also opens doors for the creation of new understanding, especially as they get older and their play becomes more complex.
Okay, so Piaget is about practice, pleasure, and fitting things into what you already know. What about Vygotsky? I know his name is often mentioned alongside Piaget's.
Yes, now let's turn to Vygotsky. Similar to Piaget, Vygotsky also emphasized the profound importance of play. He even went so far as to suggest that play is the leading source of development in preschool years. However, Vygotsky offered a contrasting perspective to Piaget's focus on pleasure. He pointed out that play isn't always pleasurable in the immediate sense, but it always serves a crucial purpose. Vygotsky argued that to truly understand play, we must consider children's evolving needs, wants, and motivations, which naturally change as they develop.
So purpose over pure pleasure. Interesting.
Exactly. For Vygotsky, play allows children to bridge the gap between the experiences they desire, what they want to do or be, and the experiences that are currently available to them in reality. This bridging brings them into what he famously called the zone of proximal development, or ZPD.
Ah, the ZPD. Yes. This is a core concept for any educator, especially those in elementary school. Could you remind us how Vygotsky defined that? I know it's that sweet spot where real learning happens.
Indeed, it's a powerful concept. Vygotsky defined the ZPD as the distance between the actual developmental level and the level of potential development as determined through problem solving under adult guidance or in collaboration with more capable peers.
Hmm.
Think of it as that sweet spot where a child can't quite do something on their own yet, but they can do it successfully with a little help or scaffolding from someone more experienced, or even from the playful context itself.
Right, the support makes the difference.
And this is precisely where play becomes so powerful. Vygotsky argued that play actively creates the ZPD. How? By allowing the child to subordinate the rules in a manner not possible in reality. In play, children have the invaluable opportunity to plan and rehearse real-life activities within a sphere of imagination. This lets them experiment with potential outcomes of their actions without any of the real-life costs or negative consequences. They could fail, try again, and refine their strategies without actual penalties. This freedom from immediate real-world constraints allows children to achieve far more than they could otherwise. The very constraints of play act as a scaffolding function, supporting the child within their ZPD. As Vygotsky so eloquently put it, in play, a child is always above his average age, above his daily behavior. In play, it is as though he were a head taller than himself.
Wow, a head taller than myself. That's such a vivid image. So for our elementary teachers, imagine a student who can count independently to 100, but still struggles with addition beyond 10. In a classroom dramatic play center, say a store, that child might be buying items that require adding larger numbers, like calculating the total for an item that costs 7 cents and another that costs 5 cents. With a peer or a teacher gently guiding them, perhaps saying, okay, you bought this for 7 cents and this for 5 cents, how much is that altogether? Is this playful context scaffolding them in their ZPD, enabling them to stretch their math skills beyond their current independent level in a meaningful, low-stakes way, just as Vygotsky described?
Absolutely, that's a perfect illustration of play creating a ZPD in action. So when we summarize both Piaget and Vygotsky, it's clear they both viewed play as crucial for learning and development. A key commonality is play's ability to help children reflectively break free from the here and now. They can mentally manipulate ideas and concepts outside of immediate reality. However, they did differ in specifics. Piaget focused on play being primarily motivated by pleasure and serving to strengthen existing knowledge by activating schema's assimilation. Vygotsky, on the other hand, highlighted a much broader range of motivations for play and saw it as a critical tool for learning new things by operating within the ZPD. Despite these differences, both theories overwhelmingly underscore the immense potential of games as powerful tools to support learning and development. And it's worth noting that subsequent educational theorists, especially those focused on early childhood education, have continued to deeply recognize play's importance for the holistic well-being of children, cognitively, physically, socially, and emotionally.
So play isn't just fluff. It's actually fundamental to how kids learn and grow, according to these giants.
Exactly. It's serious business, in a fun way.
Building on that rich psychological foundation of why play is so fundamental to learning, it's important to realize that using games to support learning isn't just some modern digital phenomenon. It has a surprisingly long and fascinating history that actually goes back much further than the first video game.
Absolutely. The use of games to support learning stretches back centuries. Even before our current fascination with digital games, there was considerable research and theory about playful learning with non-digital games. While we can't do a full historical review of every game ever, some examples truly highlight the breadth and importance of non-digital playful learning, and they provide crucial context for understanding modern video games for learning.
Like board games. I imagine those have been used for ages.
Definitely. For a long time, board games have been considered valuable educational tools. Researchers have spent over a century linking board games to various psychological topics and human cognition, even using them to inform research into artificial intelligence. The relative simplicity of board games has also been used to model collaborative mechanisms, how people work together. These same mechanisms, though often more complex and sometimes less obvious, are crucial in sophisticated video games, like massively multiplayer online games. There's also a powerful framework for understanding gameplay, whether digital or not, through the idea of affordances. Think of affordances as the possibilities for action that an environment offers. So gameplay involves either noticing, acting on, or changing the game environment and its potential actions. This framework is powerful because it applies to both digital and non-digital games, showing how insights from traditional play can directly inform our understanding of video games for learning.
That's a great way to think about it. For our elementary classroom, consider a simple board game like Candyland or Chutes and Ladders. Even these can teach basic rule following and counting. But then you have more complex, perhaps simplified versions of games like Ticket to Ride or Catan. These can teach strategic thinking, resource management, and negotiation, whether you're collaborating or competing. The affordances of the game, the pathways, the resources, the rules guide the learning. You're constantly perceiving what the game affords you to do next.
Exactly. Then, the arrival of video games in the 1970s and early 1980s, with hits like Pong and the Atari systems, immediately captivated researchers. They were intensely interested in both using video games as tools to study psychology and understanding the psychological effects of the games themselves. Early research explored everything from how games might influence generosity to the effects of subtle psychological suggestions on game performance.
So they saw the potential pretty early on.
It did. Over time, the focus shifted more directly to the educational potential of video games. One early theory of intrinsically motivating instruction based on games identified 3 key categories that made games fun and motivating. Challenge, which relies on goals with uncertain outcomes. Fantasy, which offers cognitive and emotional advantages in designing engaging environments. And curiosity, which could be sensory or cognitive, aroused by making learners feel their current knowledge was limited in some way.
Challenge, fantasy, curiosity. Sounds like a recipe for engagement.
Definitely. And very early on, psychologists began to analyze video games through the lens of psychological theory, particularly behaviorism. They showed how video games skillfully manipulate schedules of reinforcement, the patterns by which players' actions are rewarded. They found that games expertly use variable schedules of reinforcement, where rewards come intermittently, to keep players coming back. It's like a slot machine. You don't know exactly when the next big payout will be, so you keep playing. This intermittent reward system is incredibly powerful for preventing players from losing interest and for maintaining their persistence. They also analyzed how what's called cognitive dissonance played a role, where the very act of paying to continue playing, think inserting quarter after quarter into an arcade game, actually increased the desire to play, rather than diminishing it. The same principle easily extends to modern games with microtransactions that keep players engaged in paying to continue or remain competitive.
Whoa, that's counterintuitive. Paying more makes you want it more. That's a powerful insight that directly relates to teaching, too, maybe. Think about a simple classroom app where students are answering questions. If it gives a ding or a star every single time they answer correctly, that's continuous reinforcement. It might keep them going for a bit, but they could quickly get bored. But if the app gives a reward intermittently, say, after a sequence of correct answers or after completing a certain number of problems, that variable reinforcement keeps them hooked, right? Is that how it works? Just like those arcade games kept players feeding quarters, that anticipation keeps us engaged.
Exactly. That anticipation and unpredictability are incredibly motivating.
Oh.
It was in this context that a kind of golden age of pioneering educational games emerged in the late 1980s and early 1990s. With the growing availability of personal computers, we saw the birth of iconic educational software, like the Oregon Trail, Number Munchers, Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, and Reader Rabbit. These games embraced emerging best practices in teaching and learning, focusing on active participation, open-ended learning, and constructivist principles. Innovation was the norm, and even drill and practice games like Math Blaster were infused with humor and creative energy.
Oh, yeah, I remember those. Carmen Sandiego was amazing. Oregon Trail. Maybe less amazing when you died of dysentery.
Right, but they were definitely memorable. However, this early golden age eventually saw a decline. Several factors contributed. There was a significant shift from small, innovative efforts to larger, more mainstream commercial enterprises, leading to declining investment in true innovation. There were also challenges with marketing and distribution. And perhaps most importantly, there were unrealistic expectations placed on this new technology, often without enough consideration for the actual content being created, or how it would truly be integrated and used in schools. It was a classic case of enthusiasm outrunning practical application.
A familiar story with new tech sometimes. And then we moved into a truly new era. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, alongside those pioneering educational titles, a commercial game called SimCity captivated audiences. It wasn't explicitly educational software, but it had immense educational potential. It was groundbreakingly open-ended, so much so that its creator, Will Wright, often had difficulty getting publishers to support it because they wondered how he was going to make it a game without a clear win condition. Wright himself has famously stated that he thinks of his games more as toys because they're designed for open-ended discovery and experimentation. This uncompromising open-ended design of games like SimCity really foreshadowed later intensely open-ended games with huge educational potential like Minecraft.
Absolutely. SimCity was a game changer. The next major leap came around 2005 with the surging availability of high-speed broadband internet. This enabled massively multiplayer online, or MMO, games like World of Warcraft, which quickly reached millions of players. Educators quickly recognized the educational possibilities of these immersive, connected environments. For instance, researchers identified rich player interactions within MMOs that offered diverse collaborative learning opportunities, whether for civic education or even second language learning. While concerns about certain content still existed, interest in the positive effects of video games continued to grow significantly.
So the internet really opened up the social learning aspect.
Hugely. One of the most vocal advocates for video games in education in this modern era is James Paul Gee. Starting in the mid-2000s, he proclaimed that video games are good for your soul. In his influential work, Gee argued that video games embody dozens of principles of learning, fundamentally good practices for how humans learn. His work significantly shaped the modern agenda for game-based learning. Today, we have hundreds of researchers in the field, numerous academic societies and conferences, and a massive market. There are hundreds of thousands of apps that identify as educational, and major software labels are now releasing educational versions of popular commercial games, like Assassin's Creed Origins Discovery Mode, Minecraft.edu, and SimCity.edu. Emerging technologies like virtual reality and augmented reality are also gaining interest, though more research is needed to fully harness their educational potential.
So, for our elementary teachers, Minecraft.edu is a perfect example of this modern era. It's an open-ended game, originally designed for entertainment, but explicitly adapted for the classroom. It allows for incredibly creative building, complex problem-solving, and rich collaboration among students, directly reflecting Will Wright's concept of games as toys for open-ended discovery. It really brings all of these historical threads together into something truly powerful for the classroom.
Precisely. It shows how far we've come.
That historical journey really shows how far we've come. What's fascinating here is just how wide-ranging the application of games and learning has become. It's not just about STEM subjects anymore. Game-based learning is being successfully used across various school subjects, from humanities to arts and languages, and even for training fundamental cognitive skills.
That's right. Let's look at some specific examples of how playful learning applies across different domains. Take language learning, for instance. Play plays a critical role in both a child's first language acquisition and in learning a second language. Research suggests a clear link between children's symbolic pretending a banana is a phone, and their language development, particularly through the development of what's called the semiotic function, which is the ability to use signs and symbols. From a very young age, children engage in language play, which involves using language purely for pleasure, not for a pragmatic purpose like getting something or forming a social relationship. For second language learners, this language play is particularly valuable because it offers a safe space for making mistakes while learning a new language, significantly reducing anxiety.
A safe space. That sounds crucial for language learners. Like pressure.
Exactly. We have several examples of video games supporting second language learning. Players often choose to join massively multiplayer online MMO game servers in the language they're trying to learn, creating a form of digital immersion where not only the game's content but also chats with other live players are in the target language. Studies have identified various games, some explicitly designed for language learning and others not, that show utility. For example, playing life simulation games like The Sims in a second language, or even military training games designed to teach languages to service people before deployment. These examples highlight how the playful, immersive context can truly facilitate language acquisition by creating a low-pressure environment for practice.
That makes so much sense for an elementary classroom. Imagine a role-playing scenario where students are pretending to order food at a restaurant in a new language. The play aspect immediately reduces the anxiety of making mistakes, turning it into a safe space for practice, just like language play in a game. They're motivated by the fun of the role play, not just the drills, right?
Precisely. Moving to mathematics and science, or STEM fields, these have been a significant focus for game development and research, largely due to the emphasis on STEM in school curricula. The potential of play to support STEM learning begins even with the youngest students. For example, simple block play in preschoolers has been found to predict later academic achievement in mathematics. More broadly, playing with spatial toys like blocks, puzzles, and shape games supports the development of crucial spatial skills and is linked to school readiness, particularly for STEM areas. While manipulatives, both physical and virtual, are useful and fun for math and science, it's vital they are effectively incorporated into lessons rather than just being a break from real learning. Virtual manipulatives, in particular, can offer even greater opportunities than physical ones, providing enhanced support for learning through dynamic interactions.
So using those blocks or virtual tools needs to be tied to the learning goal, not just free time.
Right. One insightful argument is that learning math from books can actually inhibit mathematical thinking because it often focuses too heavily on mastering skills rather than understanding core concepts. In contrast, video games provide an ideal environment for math learning because they situate math in context, giving numbers meaning and motivating players to develop mastery to succeed in the game. You're applying math to solve a real in-game problem, not just an abstract one on a worksheet. Similarly, for science, chemistry learning simulations, much like video games, provide a safe environment for scientific experimentation. You can mix virtual chemicals or build virtual structures without real-world dangers, allowing for iterative learning from graceful failure, where mistakes are learning opportunities, not punishments.
Graceful failure. I like that term. Okay, so situating math. Let's make that concrete for elementary. Instead of just memorizing multiplication facts, imagine an elementary game where students manage a virtual lemonade stand. They have to calculate ingredient costs, set selling prices, and figure out their profits. The math is immediately contextualized. It has a clear meaning and purpose within the game, motivating them to master it because they want their lemonade stand to succeed. For science, maybe a simulation where students build a simple circuit and observe how different components affect it allows for safe, hands-on experimentation without the mess or danger of a real lab, right? This is the kind of practical, low-stakes application that makes abstract concepts concrete.
Exactly. Those are perfect examples. And beyond just skills and knowledge, playful learning can also positively shift attitudes toward math and science. For instance, the Rapunzel Project, an online game designed to teach basic programming skills to girls, found that after playing, 6th grade students showed significant improvements in self-efficacy and self-esteem related to computers. This demonstrates how games can foster positive attitudes and confidence, especially for subjects where students might feel less confident.
That's huge. Changing attitudes is half the battle sometimes. What about subjects like social studies or history?
Great question. In social studies and history, video games leverage strong narratives and interactivity to support learning. The Civilization series, for example, has been used to teach these subjects. Research has shown that games like Civilization 3 can engage high school students in unique ways, supporting their conceptual understanding of history. While teachers need creativity to integrate these complex games into existing curricula, situating game experiences within rich classroom discussions and non-game activities can greatly enhance learning. Historians and game designers also highlight that historical simulation games present historically relevant problem spaces. Players must make meaningful decisions within these visual, oral, and spatial worlds, helping them understand complex, interrelated historical systems. While concerns exist about potential oversimplifications, the potential for deep engagement and understanding of historical processes is undeniable.
So, for younger students, maybe not full-blown Civ, but a simplified settlement builder game can be incredibly powerful. Imagine they have to manage resources for a historical community, making decisions about food, housing, and protection. They experience the cause and effect of their choices in a historical context, which is far more engaging and memorable than just reading about it in a textbook. They live the history, in a way.
Precisely. They're making decisions, seeing consequences. Finally, there's significant interest in using video games to develop specific cognitive skills. A series of studies, for example, have shown that action video games, think fast-paced, first- and third-person shooter games, can enhance a variety of perceptual and cognitive functions, including skills related to learning. Notably, one study demonstrated that just 30 hours of playing action video games over an 8-week period significantly improved visual spatial attention in participants who weren't regular players. This means they got better at quickly perceiving and understanding visual information in space.
Action games improving attention, that might surprise some people.
It does. And a related and critical area is the use of video games to develop executive functions, or EFs. These are a set of interrelated cognitive skills vital for planning, monitoring, and controlling our mental processes while performing a task. There's growing evidence linking strong EFs to better academic achievement, making their development a key focus, especially in elementary years. While some commercial games or gamified measures often show negligible effects on EF, custom-built games designed specifically to train these skills show real promise. For instance, some research has found that playing a video game developed to train the EF skill of shifting. The ability to flexibly adjust to changing demands significantly improved this ability in students after just a few weeks of gameplay. And what makes these games even more effective are elements like adaptive challenge, emotional engagement of game characters, and overall emotional design that makes the experience compelling.
Executive function skills like attention, planning, and task switching are absolutely crucial for elementary students to succeed in the classroom. So, a game designed to practice shifting might involve a child quickly sorting shapes by color, and then suddenly the game shifts, and they have to sort them by size instead. This structured, playful practice strengthens those EF skills that are needed for navigating complex classroom tasks and assignments, not just learning content, but learning how to learn and think flexibly.
Exactly. It's training those core cognitive muscles through play. As we've seen, all these examples of game-based learning draw on various psychological and learning theories. This raises an important question. What theories are driving these designs? In fact, no single learning theory can be applied to all educational games. Effective educational games are often polytheoretical, meaning they cleverly embrace concepts from multiple theories simultaneously. Imagine a single game that uses a cutscene with narration and animation to explain a concept that's leveraging information processing theory. If players correctly solve a problem, the game might give them points and a pleasant sound, drawing on behaviorism. Then players might have to explain their solution and collaborate with others to solve a more complex problem, integrating cognitive and social constructivism. This multi-theory approach is key to enhancing both learning and playfulness. Let's delve into some of these foundational theories.
Polytheoretical, so mixing and matching theories to get the best results. Makes sense. Where do we start? Behaviorism.
Yeah, let's start there. As early analyses showed, the principles of behaviorism go a long way in explaining the appeal of video games. Think of B.F. Skinner's ideas about operant conditioning. Behaviors are strengthened or weakened by rewards and punishments. In games, players are given ample opportunities for their actions to be reinforced. Successfully completing objectives, leveling up, progressing the story, receiving cool in-game items, or earning visible trophies are all forms of reward. Conversely, failure typically results in the punishment of having to repeat sections, which players naturally want to avoid. The consequences of actions in games are often immediate, allowing players to easily link their gameplay to what follows.
Immediate feedback. That seems crucial.
Very. Games skillfully employ both continuous reinforcement schedules, where every desired behavior is rewarded, and intermittent reinforcement schedules, where rewards are given only at certain periods or after a certain number of behaviors. It's the skillful use of these intermittent schedules, like the unpredictable but always possible reward, that motivates players to persist through challenges and keep coming back to the game after a break. They never know exactly when that next big reward will come, creating a powerful sense of anticipation. This consistent participation and engagement are, of course, absolutely necessary for successful learning.
So for our elementary teachers, this is really relatable. Many classroom management systems already use behaviorist principles, sticker charts for good behavior, points for participation, even losing recess for breaking rules. Digital games often do this even more naturally with their immediate feedback and varied rewards. Is it about finding ways to provide varied and immediate positive feedback in our own game-based classroom activities to keep students motivated and on task, rather than just a simple good job every time?
Exactly. It's about being strategic with how and when you reinforce. Next, let's look at information processing theory. From this perspective, video games constantly send vast amounts of stimuli to the player's senses, from enemy projectiles to on-screen maps. Through attention, players select the most relevant stimuli for processing in their short-term memory, where information is coordinated and skills are mobilized to achieve game objectives. Repetition of this process allows new information to be encoded into long-term memory, leading to learning and proficiency.
Okay, so it's about how our brain handles all that input from the game.
Right. Modern understanding of working memory, for instance, suggests our brains have different channels for processing visual and auditory information. The crucial insight for game design is this. By splitting their output between moving images and audio, games utilize both the visual and auditory channels, which can significantly facilitate information processing. This multisensory approach helps in building mental models by offering ready-made, clear representations of complex concepts.
Using eyes and ears together is better than just one.
Pretty much, yeah. Building on this, Mayer's cognitive theory of multimedia learning argues that splitting information between visual and auditory channels actually enhances learning by not overwhelming the limited capacity of either channel alone. This frees up cognitive resources for learners to actively filter, select, organize, and integrate information into long-term memory. Beyond visual and auditory, games can also use haptic feedback, like the rumble in a controller or touchscreen controls, further leveraging multiple modalities, making the learning experience even richer.
That's a powerful application in an elementary setting. Imagine a game designed to teach letter recognition. It doesn't just show the letter, it also says its sound, and then allows the child to trace it on a screen with haptic feedback where they feel a vibration. Is that a perfect example of leveraging multiple sensory channels, sight, sound, touch consistent with Mayer's theory, making it much more effective and memorable than just seeing the letter in a book?
Precisely. That multimodal input significantly boosts learning and retention. Thirdly, we have constructivism, which posits that knowledge is actively constructed by learners themselves, rather than just being passively copied into their minds. This is a fundamental shift in how we view learning. The theories of Piaget, with his focus on assimilation and building on existing knowledge, and Vygotsky, with the zone of proximal development where new learning is scaffolded, were instrumental in the founding of cognitive constructivism and social constructivism, respectively. So their ideas about play's value form a direct foundation for how constructivism operates in playful learning theory.
So learners build their own understanding.
Exactly. The key aspect here is situated learning, which video games are particularly good at enabling. In situated learning, knowledge is built and understood within the same context in which it will later be applied. Think of it as learning by doing, within a relevant, meaningful environment. Games provide these rich, virtual worlds where abstract concepts become concrete and immediately applicable. You're not just learning a formula, you're using it to build a bridge or solve a puzzle in a virtual world.
That really brings it to life. So a math game where elementary students build a bridge and need to calculate the correct angles or lengths for it to stand or estimate how many supplies they need is a perfect example of situated learning, right? The abstract math concept isn't just a number on a page, it's directly applied to a meaningful problem-solving context within the game. They're literally constructing their understanding as they solve the problem.
Exactly. Building on constructivism, social constructivism emphasizes that knowledge is socially situated and constructed through interactions with others. Contrary to the popular stereotype of gaming as a solitary activity, it is often highly social. Over 70% of gamers report playing with a friend, either cooperatively or competitively. This social aspect is crucial for fostering social construction and sharing of knowledge. James Paul Gee, for example, talks about affinity groups that form online around specific games where people actively share information, problem solve, and learn together, whether it's about game strategies or complex scientific concepts embedded in the game.
So learning happens between people too, not just inside one head.
Yes, absolutely. Another example comes from professional role-playing games, where learners are immersed in roles like engineers or biologists to solve complex scientific problems. This kind of game merges sociocultural and constructivist learning principles, setting up the learner with a role to inhabit, practice problem-solving, engage in gameplay, and debate arguments that occur in the service of that role. It makes learning deeply authentic and collaborative.
This is directly applicable to elementary classrooms, too. Think about group projects in a game like Minecraft, where students collaborate to build a historical city. They have to research different architectural styles, divide tasks, communicate their plans, and explain their choices to each other. This fosters a social construction of knowledge and collaborative problem-solving that goes far beyond individual work, truly bringing social constructivism to life.
Perfect example. It shows how these theories play out in real learning environments.
Okay, we know games are incredibly engaging. We've talked about the psychology behind that engagement. But how does that engagement translate into effective, meaningful learning? It's one thing to be captivated, but another to actually absorb and apply knowledge.
That's the core question that makes game-based learning so exciting. High levels of engagement are a primary reason why educators advocate for games as learning tools. We've already touched on some of the features that make games so engaging. Variable reinforcement schedules that keep players hooked, appealing sensory input, cognitive challenges that stretch abilities, and social connection with other players.
When playing a truly good video game, players often describe being in a deeply immersed state, almost losing themselves in the activity. This immersion is a significant part of the educational potential of video games.
That feeling of being totally in the zone.
Exactly. This deep state of engagement is what Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi famously described as flow. When individuals are in a state of flow, they are deeply and effortlessly involved with their current activity, so immersed that they lose self-awareness and even their sense of time. There's a powerful sense of control over one's actions and a feeling of competence. A flow state is typically induced when someone faces challenges that stretch their abilities but don't overwhelm them, coupled with clear goals and immediate feedback on their progress. Because games can so perfectly meet all these criteria, constant feedback, adaptive challenge, clear goals, Csikszentmihalyi has identified them as an ideal medium for inducing a state of flow.
So games are like flow machines.
In a way, yes. In educational settings, flow states are incredibly important. They alleviate the burden of self-conscious awareness, that little voice in your head that might say, "Am I good enough?" Or "What if I fail?" By reducing this self-awareness, learners can focus all their attentional resources on processing important educational information. Furthermore, the very experience of flow acts as a powerful motivator to repeat tasks that provided that experience. So experiencing flow through highly engaging educational games can free up cognitive resources for learning and strongly motivate learners to persevere through challenging or repetitive tasks.
Okay, that makes sense. It frees up your brain to just learn.
Right. To put a finer point on engagement, researchers like Schwartz and Plass define 4 types. Behavioral engagement, which is the player's physical actions within the game. Cognitive engagement, which is the player's processing of information, planning, and decision-making. Emotional engagement, their emotional response to the game. And sociocultural engagement, their social interactions with other players. For learning to occur effectively, cognitive engagement is absolutely vital, and often emotional engagement can be a powerful driver of that crucial cognitive engagement, making you want to think hard.
I can picture that so clearly in an elementary classroom. A child intensely focused on a math puzzle game, completely oblivious to the noise around them, is likely in a flow state. The challenge is just right, they get immediate feedback on whether their solution is correct, and they feel a sense of control over the game. Is this deep, effortless focus an ideal state for learning, where their cognitive resources are fully directed at the task, making them truly receptive to new information?
Absolutely. That deep focus is where profound learning can happen. Motivation, of course, is the fuel for all learning. Games are inherently motivating because they tap into players' needs, wants, and desires, as Vygotsky put it. This can be as simple as Piaget's functional pleasure, the pure joy of doing something. But it also includes more complex motivations, like the need for cognitive challenge, the desire to learn, or the desire for social connection.
So it connects back to those basic needs and desires.
Exactly. Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs provides a useful framework here, moving from basic physiological needs to higher-order ones like self-actualization. Researchers have adapted Maslow's hierarchy for game players, outlining needs from the most basic rules and safety, knowing how to play and how to stay in the game, up to belongingness, feeling comfortable and that winning is possible, esteem, feeling in control and competent, knowledge and understanding, seeking greater challenges and learning strategies, aesthetic, enjoying the graphics and experience, and finally self-actualization, or the need to play God within the virtual world, creating and controlling.
A hierarchy of needs for gamers. That's fascinating.
It is. A key distinction in motivation is between intrinsic and extrinsic motivations. Intrinsic motivation is when an activity is done for its own sake, for the pure enjoyment of it. Extrinsic motivation is when an activity is done for external rewards, like points or trophies. While games use both players might seek trophies, extrinsic, but also play for the sheer fun of the actions, intrinsic. Research suggests that effective game design considers both. Crucially, intrinsic motivations generally lead to better educational outcomes over time. This also brings up the importance of aligning game mechanics, the actions you do in the game, with learning mechanics, the activities that support learning. This alignment helps prevent students from gaming the game, where they find ways to succeed in the game without actually learning the intended educational content.
Avoiding the game problem. That's key. Finding ways to win without learning.
Right. Expanding on this, self-determination theory by Deci and Ryan focuses on 3 natural and intrinsic psychological needs that drive us. Competence, the need to feel mastery and effectiveness. Autonomy, the need for personal agency and choice. And relatedness, the need for social connections and belonging.
Games naturally provide these. Players are typically given agency to complete goals, autonomy, are supported and allowed to retry until they achieve mastery, competence, and often work collaboratively or share accomplishments with others, relatedness. Meeting these needs greatly enhances enjoyment, persistence, and ultimately learning.
Competence, autonomy, relatedness feels like a recipe for well-being, not just motivation.
They're deeply connected. Related to intrinsic and extrinsic motivation is the concept of achievement goals. Learners tend to have either a mastery goal orientation, focusing on learning new skills and truly mastering material, or a performance orientation, which aims to maximize favorable evaluations, like gaining points or trophies. Mastery goals generally lead to more adaptive and effective learning patterns. For example, a study on a geometry game found that while performance badges sometimes led to better outcomes, mastery badges were more effective for students with higher genuine interest in the game, highlighting the need for personalization in game design.
That's a huge takeaway for elementary teachers. In a classroom game, if the only goal is to get points, students might focus on gaming the system rather than truly understanding the concept. But if the game mechanics reward mastering the concept, maybe by having them explain why an answer is correct or demonstrating a new skill, it fosters that mastery goal orientation, which is far more beneficial. And thinking about Maslow, could a well-designed game start with clear rules to meet basic needs, then introduce social elements for belongingness, and then increasingly challenging content for knowledge and understanding, keeping motivation high throughout?
Absolutely. It's a powerful design strategy. Another exciting aspect of digital technologies, including games, is their potential for personalized learning. While there's still a lot of discussion about what personalized learning truly means, beyond just adapting to correct test answers, the concept is powerful. One idea is microadaptivity. Games can intelligently monitor, interpret, and respond to learners' behavior in real time to maintain engagement and optimize learning. This requires embedded, educationally relevant assessments that feed directly back into the game to adjust its challenge and support, all without the learner even noticing.
So the game adjusts itself to the student constantly.
Ideally, yes. Furthermore, games have shown particular success in supporting populations with special needs. For example, an early study found that children with learning disabilities improved their spatial abilities by playing certain puzzle games like Tetris. More recently, educational video games designed with Universal Design for Learning (UDL) guidelines have been shown to heighten engagement for students with learning disabilities over a year. While traditional test scores didn't always show immediate increases, this suggests that games offer unique learning benefits not always captured by standard assessments. It argues for assessments built directly into games to truly measure this learning in an authentic way.
This is huge for elementary inclusivity. An adaptive reading game that adjusts its difficulty based on a child's real-time performance or offers tailored hints when they're struggling is a perfect example of microadaptivity at work. And for students with learning disabilities, games can offer multiple means of representation: visual, auditory, interactive, and multiple means of expression, aligning perfectly with UDL principles to make learning accessible and engaging for everyone.
Exactly. Finally, let's consider affect and emotional design. As we mentioned earlier, play provides a safe space with minimal real-life costs, a concept also true for video games. In games, players are more inclined to take risks because the cost of failure is significantly lower than in the real world. Unlike traditional learning environments where a single failure might result in a harsh penalty, failure in a game typically means replaying a sequence with added insight from previous attempts. Failure isn't undesirable, it's expected and often necessary for learning. This concept of graceful failure reduces negative feelings and encourages persistence. Repeated attempts also allow players to regulate their own learning, setting goals, monitoring progress, and assessing strategies.
Failure as a learning tool, not a punishment. That's powerful.
It really is. There's growing interest in understanding the crucial role of emotions in learning. For instance, the control value theory of achievement emotion suggests that positive emotions, like enjoyment, foster a sense of autonomy and intrinsic value in learning. Building on this, the emotional design approach for digital learning environments argues that the very design of the game itself can induce positive emotions to enhance learning. This can involve simple things like using round shapes and warm colors in character design, which can subtly induce positive feelings and improve information processing without the player even consciously realizing it.
So the look and feel of the game actually impacts learning by influencing emotion.
Wow. So a game designed with friendly, rounded characters and vibrant, warm colors to present a challenge might actually induce positive emotions in an elementary student, making the learning experience more enjoyable and effective.
And when a child fails a level, the game's design encourages them to try again, rather than making them feel defeated. Am I understanding this right? That this subtly teaches resilience and self-regulation, vital skills for any learner? You've got it perfectly. The design itself becomes part of the pedagogy, fostering that positive emotional climate for learning. So as we've explored, the field of developmental psychology has long recognized the importance of play, seeing it not only as the most natural way of learning, but also as a central mechanism of cognitive development. A key feature of play, and thus of game-based learning, is that it is intrinsically motivating. We play for the sake of play. Also essential is the safe space created by play, a magic circle, as it's often described, with its own rules and logic separate from reality. Within this circle, risks can be taken and graceful failure is allowed with minimal consequences. To be an effective tool for learning, the design of this magic circle, as an educational game, needs to be deeply informed by learning theories. While educators often have a specific theoretical stance, playful learning is remarkably consistent with multiple theories, and, arguably, a polytheoretical approach is needed to fully understand game-based learning and maximize its potential.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. If we connect all of this to the bigger picture, what are the core takeaways, the fundamental principles, for anyone interested in harnessing this powerful approach in their teaching? What really matters when we think about playful learning?
That's a great question. Building on everything we've discussed today, 5 key principles of playful learning emerge, which are crucial for any educator to understand and apply.
Okay, the 5 principles. Let's hear them.
First, and perhaps most importantly, playful learning is intrinsically motivating. It taps into those inherent human drives like fun, pure pleasure, the desire for challenge, and even that deep human need for self-actualization, where learners feel like they can play God and truly control their virtual world, making a real impact. This internal drive is far more powerful and sustainable than external incentives alone.
Intrinsic motivation first. Got it.
Second, playful learning depends on a break from reality. It provides that magic circle, that safe space for exploration and graceful failure without real-world consequences. This freedom from fear of judgment or severe penalties allows for experimentation, trying out new ideas, and taking risks, all of which are absolutely essential for true learning and growth.
The magic circle, the safe space.
Okay. Third, playful learning requires a polytheoretical approach. As we've seen, it's not about adhering to just one learning theory. The most effective games for learning will often thoughtfully integrate concepts from multiple theories, like the immediate feedback of behaviorism, the structured information flow of information processing, and the collaborative problem-solving of constructivism, to enhance both the learning outcomes and the sheer playfulness of the experience.
Mix and match theories.
Right. Fourth, new technologies provide new opportunities for playful learning. While the fundamental principles of play remain consistent across time, the amazing capabilities of modern technologies, from high-speed internet enabling massive online collaboration to intuitive touchscreens, immersive haptic feedback, and emerging virtual and augmented reality, offer unprecedented new ways to design and deliver powerful game-based learning experiences.
Technology opens new doors for play. Makes sense.
And finally, and critically, fifth, playful learning requires a deep integration of play and learning. This means that in effective games for learning, the game mechanics, what players do in the game, and the learning mechanics, the activities that truly support learning, must perfectly align. This ensures that in-game activities are both fun and educationally effective, preventing the risk of students gaming the game, finding shortcuts to win, without truly learning the intended concepts or skills. It ensures the play is the learning.
Aligning the fun with the learning. That seems absolutely crucial. It's a truly profound implication when you think about it. By consciously applying the concept of playful learning, digital games can create educational experiences that may very well go beyond even what was envisioned by giants like Vygotsky and Piaget in supporting children's cognitive development and learning. It's not just about adding games to education. It's about understanding how the very nature of play can transform education. It's an exciting future for classrooms everywhere.
It really is. The potential is immense. #tagoutro.
We've taken quite a journey today, haven't we? From grappling with the elusive definition of play through the foundational theories of Piaget and Vygotsky to the fascinating history of games in education, and finally exploring how modern learning theories are woven into their very design. We've seen how games uniquely engage and motivate learners, tapping into deep psychological principles that resonate with human nature itself.
For you as an elementary educator, these insights can be truly transformative. They provide a powerful lens through which to view your teaching practice, encouraging you to move beyond traditional methods to embrace the inherent power of play. It's about designing environments where learning is not just effective, but also joyful and deeply engaging for every student.
So consider this. If learning truly happens best when it feels like play, what is the game we are designing for our students, not just with screens and digital tools, but in every moment of the classroom? How can we make our classrooms more like that magic circle, a safe space where exploration, curiosity, graceful failure, and intrinsic motivation truly thrive?
This deep dive is just the beginning of understanding the immense potential of playful learning. We encourage you to keep exploring, experimenting, and bringing the transformative